Thanks, Rahul. Always interesting to listen to you. Now, our day is packed here at the India Cloud Summit 21, hashtag ICS21, and we have lots of giveaways through the day. Now, apart from social media, you could also head to our virtual booths, engage with our virtual partners, fill in the feedback forms, and well, we've got some goodies there as well. With that, in just a few moments, we'll be listening to our international cloud keynote, Digital Transformation at Speed, the Value of Cloud. Our speaker is the chairman, CEO, and founder of Stralynn Consulting Services, Inc., a pioneer in digital transformation and the founder of DigiAlps, an IT consulting company. Please welcome Alpna Doshi. Over to you, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, Ashwin. Hello and welcome to the second annual Dynamic CIO India Cloud Summit. I sincerely hope you all are keeping well and getting back to normalcy. Now, before I introduce our distinguished keynote speaker for the day, let me take a short while to introduce the topic and the speaker as well. Shortly after the COVID-19 pandemic broke out in March 2020, which was last year, most companies were forced to become digital businesses almost overnight. Whether they were ready or not, organizations spanning every industry and every size were forced to embrace digital transformation. And the resulting pace of change has been astonishing since then. In a recent survey that PwC did with the CEOs, some 85% of them agree that they will increase investment in digital transformation. To realize these ambitious dreams of the transformation, besides a strong, robust strategy and a huge cultural shift, technology will play a pivotal role too. It already has been playing, but now it is at the fore. And cloud computing is a key component of that technology stack that pushes the case for digital transformation. Now, to discuss some of the key issues and challenges, I have the privilege of having with us a super successful CIO, a businesswoman of a great stature, an entrepreneur, a board member, Alpna Doshi. Alpna is currently the chairman and CEO of Stralynn Consulting Services based in San Francisco, US. Besides this, she continues to hold several board member positions, including Mimecast and Eternity. Prior to that, she was the Chief Digital Officer at Riverbed Technology and Group CIO of Philips. During 2009 and 2016, that's when I interacted with Alpna the most. She served as the CIO of Reliance Communication. Welcome to the summit, Alpna. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you, Rahul. Really a pleasure to be part of this Cloud Summit, which is such an integral topic. And my personal pleasure in having known you for a zillion years, if I put it that way, and you still look very young and very, very charming. So look forward to this particular discussion.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I personally cherish this relationship. Whenever you have been in India, you have always called on, and it's been a pleasure to be in touch. So let me begin the conversation by some warm-up questions. What are some of those strong headwinds that enterprises are facing for which they need to reimagine their technology strategy?
I mean, there are obviously, it has been, as you mentioned, not the best of times over the whole of more than a year. And obviously, all enterprises, the natural flow, how they were operating, suddenly got questioned. And that has created a tremendous amount of pressure, if I put it that way, how they really need to operate. Their business model itself is of question. The operating model comes next. So if you think about it, even big studies like done with McKinsey, etc., where, these we call it as the 9 jewels or 9 organizational imperatives that really make it so relevant for any one of us to relate to. And first and foremost, it has been questioned, what is the current purpose? And However English it may sound like, well, that's common sense, but today's purpose is not the same as it used to be for any company a couple of months back, right? So purpose, making it relevant for the value that you really want to focus on or bring to the industry, your end users at the end of the day. And finally, I mean, the culture, like, overall, all the people who used to work with any enterprise, they have had to go through a significant change themselves. But to carry any big or small ship is not easy. So, these three are the tenets that kind of form as the fundamental core of everything. Now, to enable all of that, I would call it as, first of all, the data therefore has become significant. Data centric platforms so that all of that data can be well nurtured to produce the right information. Alongside with that, you would notice that you need to fit it all into an ecosystem. Before we get into even like the world of systems, there is a lot more around the ecosystem of how you provide services to your end customers. How do you connect all of these dots? So at the end of the day, these strategic imperatives for an organization have really driven kind of the path to what are these technology imperatives that we need to worry about? What should be the challenges that we want to look at from a strategy of laying out an overarching roadmap of technology? And to me, what comes top of mind is exactly the topic of today's discussion. How do you make sure that in an environment where cloud is one of the major pillars in the entire technology landscape, you're actually able to see where in the journey you are with the cloud? Because when you talk about data, I mean, there is no infinite storage space that exists on prem. And that's where cloud plays a big role. And you have to really look at, what are the three most important things that in a technology strategy with cloud as the core you really need to focus on. Now, you and I are talking virtually across oceans. Is the latency right? Have we addressed that particular aspect? Right? Data can be anywhere, in the world today. Second is obviously talking about geo distances. There are regulations, and most governments have become very conscious of how do you regulate all of this. So regulation has become a key, what I call as like the blood flow within the technology strategy. You cannot ignore what kind of regulations are actually driving some of the presence of data. And finally, when you think about it, the compute power, the horsepower that is needed to really manage all the transactions, especially for high volume transactions where you still need to perform with a big improvement to latency. That's a significant key. And so, one has to really decide in the technology strategy, where are you in your cloud journey, right? Are you a beginner, or are you one of those matured role models? And can't even say enough about what Amazons and Googles and Microsofts of the world are doing. But there are so many more niche players who are kind of introducing that roadmap to the cloud, where you can be a mid-level, well-architected cloud architecture. And I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about what does that mean. But really identifying where are you in this whole stack. So when you are defining a technology strategy, it becomes significant to make sure that you really help yourself with being realistic, right? And good partners, good, consultants, and internal people all are needed in this ecosystem to make it happen for you.
Excellent. I mean, how well you have articulated it from the point where you showcased the 9 organizational imperatives that separate the future-ready enterprises from the rest of from the pack, and how going forward cloud will play not just a big role but a decisive role, and how regulation has become the blood flow, how compute power is now on our side, um, and in the end showed that cloud maturity model from the beginning to the highest level. Excellent. So when we talk of digital transformation as we know it or as it is explained, is that all that we should know, or is that all that exists, or there are more layers to it? As a practitioner, as a pioneer, who have been, what have been your three, four key experiences? I don't limit it to three, four. You can talk of as many as possible. What are your key experiences in the past few years?
You know, digital transformation, I started imagining about this term a very, very long time back. And at that point, I must say that, I really wanted to write a book. But before I could find time as a CIO to really make time to write a book, there were others in the industry who wrote much better works overall, and great books got published. So I'm still here today. I'm very passionate about the fact that digital transformation is something that I'm so pleased to see it's running in the blood of every person, every consumer, every enterprise. The plethora of change, and as they say, the acceleration that has happened in just about 15 short months, which were certainly very long from the health standpoint and other kind of implications. But as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. And in some sense, the side effects of technology improvement, I have seen it to be so significant. So if I just even look at some of the statistics, Rahul, I would say that, close to, 75 to 80% of the people in the consumers and enterprises, they are focusing on growth, absolutely go for growth. But they are really struggling, like, what are the same kind of enablers that can drive growth? And finally, I'm happy to see that more than 60% of the prioritization has been focusing on digital transformation. They're all talking about, hey, let's put it in our budget cycles, let's make it happen now, not just wait for the strategic planning cycle. It's a need today. So that clearly sets the stage for the whole aspect of, okay, where do you now really introduce digital transformation? There was a time when they used to say, hey, let's put up that wonderful high-end ERP system or a Salesforce or a CRM system, and that's what is digital transformation. And I can tell you today, boy, how out of the main core stream you would be if you start talking about just implementations in the offset. It's about customer experience. What is it that you want to deliver at the end of the day to meet the ease of doing business, right? We know that Prime Minister Modi talked about ease of doing business when he came into office. It's been quite a while now. And today we are embracing that particular aspect of customer experience. How do you enable that? Think about it. Portal is the window to how you talk to customers.
Yep.
And that used to be such a technical word. But today, if you look at it, you tell me, Alpna, can you come and get me a portal that allows my customers to really, make it self-servicing, right? You can see all your product line. You can see what are the recommendation engines. You can see what will be the pricing of things. Cost matters. So when I think about these things in the digital transformation journey, my mind comes to, from a customer standpoint, you are not only having to ease the pain and the services you need to give to the customers, but obviously, like I said, cost does play a role. And there used to be a world with, very expensive, high-end, I'd like to mention, like whether it is Microsoft or Salesforce licenses. And today, what we talk about is all of these subscription-based services where, you can use open source. You can make it a lot more OpEx oriented rather than, huge capital expenditures as an outflow. And that's where, when I think about it in my journey today, current softwares are actually driving our businesses. Think about that developer you didn't pay attention to. Your developer is the CEO of companies. And I feel so proud and privileged to know many such talent in the industry where these developers, even when I was with Reliance, I mean, these were the guys who actually could run and create new products and innovations and really bring to the forefront the connection with strategy and growth. And that's where I say that, in digital transformation today, we have to look at examples. And I'd like to share maybe a couple from my own journey, since that, as you mentioned very rightly, it's been long and hopefully not outdated. Many of those experiences I'm seeing even now today with brighter minds applying it. And if you think about very large global, Fortune 500 companies, multinationals, they are facing an area where they have like more than 500 plus applications at any given time, right? And I walked into one of these, and the key aspects that were asked of me: hey, reduce cost, get it all streamlined, and get the right people in place. Without saying any more on that, across 80 countries, trying to do it with more than, 100,000 plus people, carrying the weight of a cultural shift and doing it in 18 months. That itself was like a lifetime kind of, contribution, if I call it that way. I couldn't take another corporate job, significant enough after having gone through that kind of pressure. But it is so rewarding. Applications consolidations form a key part of digital transformation, right? In private equity industry driven, to which also I had my privilege of helping out multiple portfolio companies, in those areas, you find that there isn't a significant IT organizations always present in the smaller companies. And you really need to come in and think straight. What is needed for getting an operations running properly? How do you enable sales operations to be efficient, right? And that's where you look at, I looked at examples where I could come in and look at the business process that you're running in today's environment, and how can you make it one touch, period. That is digital transformation. Yep. And finally, I'll just mention another example where you think about it: mergers and acquisitions and carve outs. Look at CNBC anytime, there is nonstop changes in companies' construction, right? What is organizing the key entity, what's being spun off, and, the special vehicles that are also being launched. So when you see all of this, there is data on one side of the company, there is data that needs to be spun out. And that itself drives a lot of digital transformation, right? So I can honestly spend a couple of evenings with you just going through what is digital transformation today. But I'm very happy, very, very, impressed by the changes many companies are bringing into the environment, and new boutique firms, niche firms that are cropping up to help with this kind of change.
Oh, excellent. I mean, this in itself is a session, to be very honest. It was a very, in a true sense, it was a very loaded answer, and I was expecting this. Too many things that you said about it, and it actually demystifies the cliched meaning digital transformation as most of organizations perceived earlier, but are now realizing that was a very myopic view on digital transformation. What it is something else. I mean, it is about easing your pain. It is about creating the customer experience. It is about focusing on growth. It is about finding enablers where organizations are struggling. You talked about self services. I can understand when you were the CIO of Reliance Communication. You have done a lot in that area of self services, and that was when this term called digital transformation was just emerging on the horizon. Um, Thank you very much for this explanation. So, what value, I will come straight to the point now. What value do you assign to a cloud infrastructure or adoption of cloud to fulfill these larger dreams of, of a stronger digital business with a very sustainable customer experience?
Well, I remember speaking to you perhaps a couple of years, and I said, I used to hear this feedback. Cloud is so cloudy. You know, today no one says of it in that sense. Yes, they do call cloud as, perhaps it's a magic. You have all of this, and somehow the data just goes and vanishes somewhere, and you're still able to do what you need to do using that information. So, you know, I'm seeing that not too far away from where we are today, in another 18 to 24 months, perhaps,
Mhm.
we will all see enterprises aspiring to spend $8 out of every $10. If I talk in dollar terms, just, basically 80, 90% of every currency that you use is going to be going towards hosting on the cloud. That is the kind of priority and the center stage that cloud has really taken. Today, you know, the various catalysts that we talk about, there is $1 trillion in business value that cloud adoption can unlock. And that goes without saying that pretty much almost every innovation, every operational process transactions, they are going to be running using the blue sky, right? And I look at examples where, if you look at various industries, say high tech, that's the majority of what I call, focus, where everything is definitely running on the cloud even now. There is the high tech SaaS, very prominent term that all of us are not only hearing but actually applying. I've worked for companies helping out in the portfolios where, you know, their whole digital products of printing, for example, that getting translated into what is subscription based model. Now that's all SaaS. And that SaaS has to run on cloud. I would like to highlight customer experience where in industries, almost every industry, it's pretty much applicable chatbots. Today, instead of calling up customer service, most of us prefer actually to be pretty, interacting with passive chatbots where it's still real time, but you can be wherever you want at whatever time and in whatever situation, so to speak. So the chatbots do require huge amounts of data that need to be stored. And that does not mean that you can actually just access it if there is like a shortage of on-premise server. With the cloud technology being readily available, the accessibility to all this data has become so seamless. You look at, again, omni-channel distributions, the fulfillment in retail and telecom industries through omni-channel, it is leveraging the entire artificial intelligence and machine language to the hilt, where the fast moving data can actually be then monetized in order to enhance the customer experiences. So, the cloud infrastructure, to say the least, as there is nothing better in the technology stack that could have happened other than the cloud. I mean, I give it so much of value. And today, these are not just the big players, but hosting cloud in co-tenant infrastructures, hosting clouds with, like we were talking about, keeping in mind the regulatory aspects, and also being able to create your own private clouds, right? You don't have to always go to the public cloud. In defense, in other areas where there are cybersecurity and other elements which are so very much critical, and owning the data locally is also important. So the whole concept is obviously applicable to private clouds.
Great. I would still say that it is a very ambitious target, but coming from a practitioner like you, it might hold a great deal of significance when you say that eight out of $10 will be spent on hosting on the cloud. It certainly has the potential to unlock $1 trillion business opportunity. And when you showed the impact of cloud use cases, it actually resonates with what you just said. So in your past few experiences as a global CIO and a board member, which you briefly touched upon in our conversation on a few points earlier, how would you advise a CIO or a technology leader to look at cloud? Just to digress a little bit, in most cases, when I speak to CIOs from legacy organizations, the first point of confrontation is that to begin with, it looks very lucrative, but when we start using it, it becomes very expensive. And when you get locked in, it is very difficult to move out of that environment and then again host in your private data center. So how can the real value of investment in cloud be derived?
Yeah, most CIOs. So there's a generation of CIOs also that have evolved with digital transformation, right? And from the experiences I have had, when we look back and look at today, it's about harnessing the best of the cloud in the right way. That's what makes a difference. And I've been victim to being exactly in the situations that some of these CIOs are quoting, where you get logged in. You don't know at what point the businesses actually end up using so much of the cloud space that are very respected cloud providers then have to set up these thresholds where either you start paying much more of the prices than you had anticipated, and it's all goes in the flow of doing and expanding your business, or you really need to look at how are you actually set up and managing the infrastructure. So my most important point is cloud in its best way of usage can be actually used as a cash cow. I mean, absolutely. The wonders, and I don't want to, sound like this is very theoretical. I mean, today you're hearing in reality about metaverse, right? Meta, a company, Facebook, Meta, and metaverse. And I was privy to have, taking a course at Stanford, and I looked at, as a pretty old timer, joining the course on a platform called Verbella, where you really become like that avatar. And if you remember that movie Avatar, that was hard enough for me to comprehend how it all operated. Now you had to create your own avatar and really drive through the campus and meet people, have conference out there and solve major business issues.
Right.
You know, and look at that as an innovation in itself from the entire metaverse concept where it's all data rich. You really need to store data somewhere
Right.
and then operate it effectively in real time, right? Now, to set up a cloud infrastructure to do that, obviously it requires significant amount of, knowing know-how, how to do it. So these cloud natives, like we hear the term digitizens, right? The digital citizens, I now seem to be very much hung up on the cloud citizens who are really making the digital citizens happen today, right? And so when we think about all of the innovations that are happening at the speed of ideas, 70% plus are actually predicting the usage and application leveraging the cloud infrastructure. Otherwise, it's not possible. It is just not possible at the viral scale and across geographies that you really need to do these innovations. On top of that, having been with again exposed to private equity and VCs, I would call out that EBITDA improvements are such a significant player, and almost in my own experiences, I have seen close to 15 to 20% EBITDA boost by just leveraging the cloud.
Mhm.
And in the plumbing world, you call it as the tech debt. And the tech debt, to recover on all of the on-prem investments, people have generally gone to like a hybrid environment, and that allows you to kind of harness some of the old investments till they are ready for refresh, and then they move to the cloud. But that itself is a huge savings overall. The future readiness and the cost of opportunity lost is going to be one of the major things to watch out for. Now, having said that, I'd say that the infrastructure management, efficient infrastructure management, is a key component where I see challenges. It is not easy to kind of groom talents to all be operationally savvy about managing clouds. Contract management in cloud itself is an artwork, right? Otherwise, all cloud providers would definitely, find it quite lucrative to give you the cloud. To our earlier question that we were discussing, how can you manage the cloud infrastructure more efficiently, right? So you need the right talent to do all of that. But I can say that 10 years back when we talked about it, cloud, the issues with respect to downtimes, I mean, clearly there are still incidents that you hear, very recently you heard about some of the major incidents on if the cloud is down, your business goes down. So we have to be wary about it, right? So there has to be some backup planning with respect to a little bit on the on-premise side or putting it on private clouds, some redundancy to be built in. But overall, because of the way the cloud maturity has now been embraced, you can see there is certainly much more agility in the way the new features, new products, and innovations are getting introduced, right? So, you know, it would be remiss of me if I don't mention something which is a hot topic in today's, cross country, the big leaders talking about climate change. And there used to be a time when it used to be so far away from what we do in our day-to-day technology world of developers and architects. But, sustainability, every enterprise has a goal of sustainability. If we think from an angle of how cloud can enable and is beginning to enable some of these targets and sustainability, almost, predictions are it will take off what I would call an equivalent of, a 60 million ton of carbon emission improvement, which in layman's term, if you think about it, about 22 million cars will be off the road. Well, wouldn't it help with, first of all, getting the agility in terms of movement, but just having all of that pollution off the road? So it has multiple factors. Seeing if we do it right? And everything is not an ideal world. We got to balance and manage the show with, the people, the right kind of ownership, and then the tendency of introducing it, across various enterprises.
Excellent. I mean, out from the slide that you showed about the value of cloud through cost saving, through efficient infrastructure management, delivering additional features, reduction in unplanned downtime, reduction in security incidents, to the point of sustainability, which is like not really on the radar of many people, but I mean, now there are regulations and governmental norms which will force you to do that. I think cloud will be the answer. Now, coming on to my last point, due to the paucity of time for this session, can we discuss 2-3 good business cases where cloud in any form can prove to be an actual savior for the businesses?
Yes, of course, there are the post pandemic, and in some sense, we are still not totally out of the pandemic. There is, what is most recent recall value is what I call as the best use cases for leveraging the cloud infrastructure. And I'd like to mention, first of all, one where that telemedicine and healthcare are the most important things to bring to every individual on this earth, right? And those kind of use cases where, an improvement, which is currently being able to provide remote telemedicine services, which are probably in single digits at this point, really growing it to more than 50%. That should be our goal, a major use case that cloud can enable. You have to structure the data right. You have to get the electronics medical records properly facilitated with the technology improvements in how you put it up in the databases in the cloud, right? So it should not matter which direction or where you are in the world, you are getting the right help with the right specialists. That's one of the most important things. The second thing is the future are our kids and children who are, going through education. We saw even the children not having the right education given to them for many months during this pandemic. And today also there is a struggle. And I can't imagine like a 6-year-old learning how to use a Zoom and a laptop and everything and trying to really keep up with the classwork, and the teachers really trying to provide that as an institution to bring every child to that literacy rate. So when you think about that as an example itself, I would say that, looking through the stats of what UNICEF published, schools for more than 168 million children globally had been completely closed. And I call that every educational institution and enterprises who can help these, leveraging all the educational data to be put up in the clouds, making it accessible is a simple right. It help the society overall. Finally, I just call out that technologies like blockchain, being a business technology passionate person here, AI, ML, blockchain. And today, so much of the paperwork still gets touched by handoffs, your finance sheets, the reports to the board, it's so difficult to generate all of them. And blockchain is such a technology where, if you think about it, it is trusted. you can initiate a block, which is then inserted in the chain, and nobody is able to locate who the owner is. And that allows for the right kind of security to be built in. Now, that's possible only because you have this backbone of the whole cloud infrastructure backing it all up. So, collaboration and being able to connect with each other is again enabled by this kind of a technology. And to me, it's a very strong, what I call as for a priest, teaching about cloud, but making sure that the ancestors are all relating somewhere or the other to use the most efficient mechanisms. And I call out very clearly that, well, I'd like to hear more in your whole conference about how people are bringing this whole idea of leveraging the cloud, which can be cost optimal, which can help with the proper data structuring. It's not going to be, magic at the end of the day. It is about knowing how to leverage it in the best possible way.
Excellent, excellent. And the three cases that you talked about are indeed, they acted as a game changer in the real world scenario. And going forward, they will strengthen the delivery of healthcare services, the delivery of education, and the use cases in the realm of blockchain AI. Thank you so much for this such a vibrant conversation on a subject which started from digital transformation and ended with how practically the CIOs and CTOs should be using cloud and putting up cloud infrastructure. Thank you so much for your contribution. I'm really overwhelmed.
Thank you very much, Rahul. It's a pleasure, and wish you all the best for the rest of the event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.